Welcome to the Evolution Exchange podcast, bringing together the best technical leaders to talk about the industry passions and challenges that they are facing. I'm Ollie Stockford from Evolution Recruitment Solutions, helping businesses connect with top tech talent, and today I am your host. So today we're going to be debating scale-ups versus tech giants and navigating the Irish tech scene, evaluating the decisions both candidates and companies take when it comes to finding their next role or hiring their next candidate for their team. I'm delighted to be joined by a massive panel today. Gillian from Scopy, Wojciech from Techro, Dara from Noloco, and Gonzalo from Swapsy, and finally Werner from Lative. So before we delve deeper into the topic, let's get some introductions briefly. Gillian, do you want to kick us off, please?
Thank you. I'd love to. So I am the co-founder of Scopy, which is a SaaS for service-based businesses. So think marketing consultants, creative and software agencies, and business consultants. And Scopy solves a problem of scope creep, which currently costs these companies 15% of their revenue per year. And we do this by making it much faster to create accurate scopes of work. And then Scopy also captures change requests or variations in real time across multiple channels, making it much easier to quote the things that come up on the fly and capture more value throughout projects.
Thank you. Wojciech?
Hi, my name is Wojtek, and I'm engineering manager for Techro platform team, which is not really that much of a product team. What we do at Techro, we try to revolutionize clinical trials, so pretty important, I believe. What we are trying to achieve is to make things simple for our doctors and scientists to get any medication quicker to the market and reduce the time required for all of the trials, which could be very lengthy.
Fantastic. Thank you. Dara?
Hey, yeah, I'm the CEO and founder of Noloco. We're a no-code platform that lets small and medium-sized businesses build custom tools and custom applications for their business. So they can build things like client portals, custom project management solutions, custom CRMs for their team or their clients. Traditionally, small and medium-sized businesses have been kind of constrained to either vertical solutions, which they need to kind of squeeze their business into, or very horizontal solutions like spreadsheets, which require a lot of manual work. And we're building the platform that kind of hits that sweet spot at a price point that they can afford without the technical necessity of a developer.
Thank you. Gonzalo?
Good morning, and thanks for having me over there. I'm the founder and CEO of Swapsy Software. We are a custom software development company based in Dublin, but fully remote. We specialize in creating products from the ground up, and we also engage with our customers, both public and private sector, in digital transformation projects. And we've just launched a product specifically targeted to startups and scale-ups that is to allow them to develop their MVPs scalable and faster.
Fantastic. And finally, last but not least, Werner.
Hi, Oliver, and thanks for having me too. So Werner Schmidt, the founder of Lative, and we're basically a sales performance and efficiency platform. But really what we focused on is, helping sales teams turn sales reality into performance and efficiency by connecting top-down plans with bottoms-up operational data. So really what Lative's doing is enabling you to achieve profitable, efficient growth by combining these top-down plans with your bottoms-up operational data, and ultimately helping make sure that we invest in, and companies invest in the right areas within their sales organizations.
Thank you. I think it goes without saying that there's a very good panel of speakers here, and I'm I've been excited to get this one recorded. So once again, thank you for all your time on this podcast today. Now that we're all introduced, let's move on to the topic in focus. And we've been discussing separately some questions or statements. And as usual, I'll work around the panel asking you to give your thoughts on the question and the reasons behind it. and then some of you will also have the opportunity to give your take on the situations too. So let's start with Gillian. Gillian, your question was, what can startups or scale-ups do to attract talent when they're competing against the tech talent giants?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer this from a very early stage perspective because our final beta launch is next month. So I'm also really interested to hear what the people on the panel from later stages have to say about this. But as you can imagine, from our point of view, there is simply no way that we can compete against tech giants in terms of salary. But despite that, we did manage to get an incredibly skilled CTO to join our team earlier this year. So my advice for startups beginning to build their team is that while you're putting a lot of effort into making your product and company good enough to attract customers and potentially VC capital, you've also got to put effort into attracting talent. And there's a lot of opportunities out there for engineers and a lot of early stage companies planning to be the next big thing. So how will you prove that you're worth their time? So just like to share our experience, last year we participated in several startup programs. That's my co-founder, Jenna Farrell, and I, and she's based in Ireland. We got an employment grant from our local enterprise office to pay a developer to build our prototype. We tested with customers, and we were successful in getting PSSF funding from Enterprise Ireland. So this meant that at the start of this year, we were able to recruit for a CTO role. And while we were still very early stage, we'd done the work to prove that we were serious. And we got over 150 applicants, including a handful of very senior people. And when we met with our CTO, we knew he was the right person. And the right person for early stage, they're not doing it for money. They're joining a startup because they deeply believe in its potential. They want equity in a high growth startup, of course, and they want to be a core team member. So if you're pre-revenue, like we are, proving your potential is going to be different for every startup. But yeah, it's just so important because in the early days, you really need people on your team who believe in the business and the potential as much as you do.
Interesting point, Gillian, and thank you for raising that. I think you made the point where you're not necessarily looking for someone with heaps and heaps of talent. It's that person fit that wants to help scale, and talking about they're not looking for, 6-figure salary bases. They're wanting to join for equity, of course, but really see the potential in the platform that they can help scale. Anyone got anything to add to Gillian's point there? Maybe someone that is going through a similar process or recently, just post that now and looking to scale a bit further. Wojtek, anything to add to UNO-Techro a little bit further on from Scopy?
So, yeah, I kind of agree with Gillian. And by the way, thanks for having me here. It's a great pleasure to talk with such a nice panel. What I would add here, yes, and I've been part of early startups, but that was a pretty long time ago. And I was part of scale-ups and a little bit in the high-end companies. But yes, the belief, I think, that things can be done. It's that thirst for, I want to do things, right? And money doesn't really matter at that stage. And sometimes we don't aim for that high, and that I know everything person, probably that's not the one you need. You might need the person who is ready to go and ready to do things and learn along the way, because in the startup we will make mistakes, right? And you just have to pick up after those mistakes and just keep going.
Yeah. Anyone that wants to add to this, and Gonzalo, I can see that you're anticipatingly keen to give your thoughts. We're going to go to you now, just before Werner as well.
Yeah, just in very valid points what were just raised. And one key part of joining a startup is knowing that even a small change that you make, it's going to have a huge impact. It's going to have a huge impact, not only in 10 years' time, but actually now. Because even if it's implementing one process that wasn't there before, that's going to change how that startup or scale-up operates over the next 5 years. So being able to see what you can bring in to a company, that's an achievement that will be for on every member or in every employee of that startup on the early days.
Thank you, Gonzalo. Werner.
Yeah, and agree with all of it, because I think it's finding that right person, but the people also realize in startups you're going to wear multiple hats to do. I mean, yes, you've got your defined roles, but there's a lot to do, and everyone's got to pull their weights. And I think that's it. It's someone that's a go-getter, wants to get things done, and that's what you look for. And I agree, coming from multinational background, I mean, it's hard to compete. It's with all the benefits that you're going to get just on top of your salary. But I think it's people do want to get involved. I agree. I don't think it's always for the money. It's to be part of the culture. And we find that that's a big drive for finding high talent within startups to come join us versus a multinational.
Thank you, Werner. And I think your question next is key to what I'm about to say. Before we go back to Werner to answer his question, does anyone maybe want to just give their thoughts on this? Because throw into the fact that there's an early stage startup here, pre-funded like Scopy, and they need someone to really help build this platform. You're competing against so many talented engineers in Dublin. You're competing against so many good scale-ups, startups, post-funded startups, scale-ups that are doing really well from a revenue perspective. They can boast so fantastic benefits. How do you compete? Because, what sort of person do you target that is willing to take a cut on salary and join with just equity on the table? Anyone want to give their thoughts on that before we stay with Werner for his question? Dara. You're on mute. Sorry, Dara.
My bad. Sorry. Yeah, I think that's the way you phrase it. It's almost the possibly even the wrong way of looking at it. Yes, you have to go find these, but the reality of it is, like, you want someone who is incredibly keen to join a very early stage company, because they know it's not the typical 9 to 5, but they also hopefully have identified all of the benefits of joining a very early stage company, the risks and rewards, So yes, you can go find them, but it is incredibly difficult. It's like a diamond in the rough, right? Like, because you could interview or you could talk to kind of 100 people at Google or Meta, and I'd say like 98 of them wouldn't be a fit for like a very early stage company. Definitely a scale up firm. Definitely, when you have kind of 20 or 30 engineers, but for your first or your second engineer, it's a different task altogether.
Thank you, Dara. And I suppose now going back to Werner on his question here, and I think let's just picture ourselves in Lativ's situation. So looking at Lativ, albeit I'm looking at a database that might not be up to date on LinkedIn, but a team of 30, you're looking to hire. Like, how on earth do you compete when you've got the presence of tech giants? Because surely that influences your growth and development, Werner.
I think in a way, when you look at the giants, yes, again, we can't compete with them. But when what we found was what part of the decisions on why we set up an island. I mean, I've been here 24 years plus. I've been part of the tech scene as it's grown from early 2000 to what it is. And when we looked at the country of where to set up the company, just the pool of people and the talent that we would have in Ireland, we found would be more so than maybe we find in other countries. We've also got people in other countries too, though. So that's part of the team that we're building. So I think the influence of tech companies is actually helping us find the talent that we need. I think that certainly has benefited us because you have higher skilled people within certainly the roles that we're trying to hire for. The second thing is we can be creative. I know, yes, we're not going to match on par with what a large multinational can be, but we do things like, well, holidays, yes, we can give the same amount of holidays and so on, but we're more flexible with the time commitments because we know that you're going to be working maybe weekends and so forth. So where we think of a normal 9-to-5 job, we don't operate with hours like that. We just go, look, you got to get your work done. You manage your own time. And those type of benefits, attract different people. They are willing to maybe take a drop in salary to come join us, and so forth. And also the people. What we also find is as we hire people, we go through a rigorous interview process, but it has to be a strong cultural fit for what we're building. And what we find is the people that have joined value that more than just the reward. And funny enough, even though the equity is there, and we've been very open with our equity that we've applied from an early stage, even though we are a startup, the equity hasn't been as much a driver as more that, yes, that's great that we get that if it all works, but really the team is involved and committed to Lative to make Lative successful. And that's what we wanted. Back to the earlier points that were made too. It's people that really want to be part of something, prepared to wear multiple hats. And really get things done, because that's what's so important to us. And I like the comments around, we make mistakes. We absolutely do, but it's how we react to those mistakes and course correct and get back on track, which is more important.
Thanks, Werner. Gillian, have you got anything to add to that? Going back to your experience earlier this year, having to find that founding engineer, anything to add there?
Not so much in terms of finding the engineer, but we have found that the presence of the tech giants in Ireland and the Irish startup ecosystem in general is really active, and it feels like there is a real abundance mindset, and people who work or who have worked at these tech giants, they're willing to meet with us and coach us. And for example, one of our advisors was an early team member at Salesforce and Stripe. And, it's just amazing having someone of that caliber who's in our corner and coaching us. So we've really benefited from the ecosystem that these giants play a major role in.
Has anyone else seen that they had, I know Dara Noloco have experience of individuals that have come from big tech backgrounds. Yourself, obviously, your early days as well. Have you benefited from, the wider ecosystem?
Absolutely. Like I think as Werner mentioned that these tech companies, they're obviously encouraging a great ecosystem within Ireland, but they're also bringing a lot of very talented folks from other places across Europe, other places across Asia to Dublin, giving them great experience. And then some of these folks end up being the ones that decide they want to try something new, try a smaller stage startups, try a scale up where they get more hands-on experience, right? So they're creating this, great ecosystem. It's competitive, sure, but they're bringing in great talent. And like I said, there's going to be that percentage of fantastic employees that do want to kind of try that smaller stage stuff. They're absolutely adding to that funnel, I think, as opposed to being a drain on it, bringing them elsewhere.
Fantastic. And actually staying with you now, Dara. So prior to founding Noloco, obviously you was with Inscribe. Before that, you was with a big tech firm, HubSpot. So this question that you opted for here, it resonates with yourself, but like I said before, it resonates with probably quite a few of your team already as well. So, what are the benefits for an individual? We've obviously kind of mentioned it briefly with Werner and Gillian, but is there any more benefits that you'd say as an individual when you join a scale-up rather than a tech giant? If you was in the process, say I was the candidate here, and I have interviews with big tech firms within Dublin, and also a couple of scale-up interviews with scale-ups as well, like, what benefits would you be stressing for me to join your company?
Yeah, this is something you have to do in the kind of earlier stages of interviews, as I'm sure you know too well. But there are so many things like big tech can offer you. incredible holidays, fantastic compensation, interesting projects. But there's a few things they just can't, right? Like one of those is flexibility, right? I can be much more flexible as a boss than say a big corporate, right? If someone wants to work from Spain for 2-3 weeks, like that's something that they don't need to go through 3 layers of international lawyers to get approval for. Or I can just say, yeah, I think that could work so long as your work's getting done, But even kind of less kind of frivolous things, ownership is just something that these big tech companies just can't offer as much. I mean, they do a good job, but there's something different about, taking an idea that a customer has suggested earlier that day, talking about it as a team, designing it that day, shipping it that afternoon, and then telling the customer it's launched later that day. And that's something you can do as a startup and not something you can do as a scale up. And, there's a large number of engineers that thrive on that. They like to see their impacts. They like to see the sense of ownership. And honestly, it outweighs the economic incentives of big tech more often than not, if you find the right people, and that's the challenge, I suppose. But yeah. So between like the sense of ownership and just like the experience you get, when you're in a big company, like when I was at HubSpot, I was a front-end engineer there. They have a very skilled front-end engineering team dedicated to just making the lives of their front-end software engineers better. And it's great. It's truly fantastic. But at the end of the day, you're focusing on the complicated parts of the job, like wiring up components and making the interface, but you're missing that like 0 to 1 experience, like building components from scratch, actually getting into the nitty gritty of CSS and things like that. And that's not for everyone, but if you want a more rounded experience, that's just not something a scale up can offer.
Thank you. And it's interesting, similar points raised there to Werner as well, with the flexibility element that, like you said, maybe the bigger tech firms couldn't offer. So thank you for that. I'm not going to go around the panel for this because there's obviously overlaps on a few questions, but it's really clear there that, joining a startup scale up can offer so many benefits compared to a tech giant. And this is why I didn't get a tech giant speaker on, because I think it could probably end up in a debate. So we'll move on to the next question. Thank you, Dara, for that. Wojciech, yours now. And again, I feel like I'm waiting towards joining a scale-up and startup here. A bit ironic, isn't it, really? Wojciech, how do scale-ups maintain a culture of innovation and agility compared to maybe companies like the tech giants within Ireland?
If you think about it, we already spoke about a lot of those things, right? The difference between scale-up and startup and tech giant between the tech giant probably is big, but between the scale-up and startup, not so much, right? Because you're still going to make those mistakes, but they are like in startup, like your main challenge is to acquire correct people, and get the thing out of the door, right? And get your customers, right? But then you're going to make a lot of mistakes, right? And then probably your code base and your product is not as polished. But then when you start growing, right, you expand in your engineering, expand in people, like then you start seeing cracks. Like it's like, you instantly notice, like I was delivering fast. Now that's 50% or less. And now like, what can I do, right? And again, that really goes back to the people. Now you have a little bit more probably investment and etc. You need the right people, right? You need that people with the diverse mindset of the ones who are pushing forward, but in the same time, you need the people who are kind of, hold on a second, this thing, if you're gonna push it too far, it's gonna crack, right? We're gonna slow down. And I've seen that a couple of times that we are pushing too much, too quick, and we say, hold on a second, we need to pump on the brakes, rethink, and then get things moving, right? But how we keep the culture of innovation, like first of all, you can be really transparent, right? You as the CEOs and directors and etc., even managers, right? Share the values, like be with the team, like bring them up to the to the picture. That doesn't happen in the big scale companies. You're just a cog in the wheel, you don't see the overall product. Like if you sell the product, it's a product, but it's not even you who's on the pedestal. It's your director or manager, like on the big stage, saying, yes, we achieved it, right? But at the end of the day, it's not him who done it. It's the people, on the bottom ranks, right? And while in the scale up, actually the people who actually build it, like you can see them more often, then they go to the conferences, for example. And again, you have to get the people, right people with the values, and company values is another important thing, right? If the person doesn't believe in the company values and you're not trying to achieve anything, I don't think you're gonna get too far, right? If they don't do it, right? Again, some people don't like quick decision making, but other people do, right? Because you have to keep changing, right? Whether you start up a scale up, not much difference. You just have, now you have customer base, now you have exposure, now you have more educated decisions, and you can be a little bit more stable, but you still need to be able to pivot quite quickly, like in that early stages, because big giants, they are slow. They will catch up, right? They look at as the threat and they will go after you. So, empowered teams, right? Teams are feeling empowered to do things, because you have flatter lines of reporting lines, right? So do I need to talk with Gillian? I can go ahead. She's just there, right? And we probably have way better relationship than in the big tech giant. You have an idea and it goes to the drain because some person who you were trying to sell it to didn't understand what you want, right? But in the end of the day, it was a great idea. I remember having similar situations, when I built something a long time ago, and somebody else took a credit because he was, director level, and I wasn't even mentioned. And, so...
Was that in a big tech environment?
Mm-hmm.
Was that in the big tech environment? Yeah.
Yeah.
More...
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's because it's not that they were trying to do wrong and everything, but it's probably reporting lines. It just message get lost and people don't get that much appreciated. How do you keep them? Make things fun. In the end of the day, engineers like a big kids, right? We want fun.
Yeah.
If we keep making this fun, they're gonna have fun, right? And that's what's not gonna happen in the bigger companies,
It's one of the biggest benefits that personally I stress when speaking with candidates in the process of why joining smaller scale companies is such a benefit, because they will feel that sense of accomplishment as well and a job satisfaction, because they are literally, having a lot of impact and playing a key role. Whereas, like you say, you are in essence just a cog in a wheel at a bigger tech firm. So before we move on to Gonzalo's question, Werner, have you got anything to add to that? Have you experienced, that culture of innovation differently to Wojciech, or do you think it's similar within Lative?
It's true. I think we all innovating and building great software, and I think people want to be part of that and be able to do it. And I agree with larger organizations, it is tough. You can create the demo days and so forth within the organizations, but it's hard. There's structure, there's got to be more rules on how you operate. And that brings complexity. When you're a startup, you're more nimble. You're right. You can talk to people there. You can jump on a call. And I love that example with getting customer feedback. And you really can turn it around that fast. Within a large organization, that can take a month sometimes. So we can move fast. And at the end of the day, the customers do benefit. So not much more to that. I think, and people, I think people in general, including myself, want to have that impact and be able to move at a speed which startups can allow you to do, where it's far more difficult to work in larger organizations like that. But if I think back, one thing, my experience coming from larger organizations and SaaS businesses and seeing them grow has certainly helped me on how we run and operate Lative. A lot of those principles are the same. It's just our execution can be much faster because we have less complexity. So and that's something we always remember, that and a lot of why we have to move at the pace is because of the lessons we learned over those years working for multinationals and large scale-ups or the companies they are today.
I think as well, you mentioned there, Werner, a good point, that customers benefit when they're when they're working with a smaller company with scale up as opposed to a bigger tech company. I think anyone benefits, as simple as the employee benefits, rather than having to jump through barriers to get authorization on changing a sort of direction in their workflow, or a simple request about, sounds really stupid, but a holiday. I'm sure you'll have to jump through a lot of barriers to get that authorized. Like Darragh mentioned before, if someone wants to work from Spain, although obviously that's will be considered, it'll be more likely or easier for Darragh to give an answer straight away or sooner than it would be to request it to a big tech firm that has to go through HR, director of VP of engineering and so forth. So thanks for raising that point, Werner. Gonzalo, over to you. This was a similar question to Gillian, but we changed Gillian's ever so slightly because Gillian mentioned what startups and scale-ups can do to attract talent when they're competing, whereas Gonzalo's was how important is talent acquisition and retention. So it is different, and I think the focus here is whenever a startup or scale-up is looking to recruit, that one hire can be really important, whereas a tech giant does this on a daily basis. They churn recruitment. This is more important for companies like Swapsy, for example. So over to you, Gonzalo.
Yeah, it's not that it's important, it's actually critical. Talent acquisition, finding the right resource, finding the right person for the job is always a critical decision. And it's a long process. In some cases, you could be spending 3 months to find the right person. And you have to make sure that person will stay with you for enough time to justify it. So first comes the acquisition, that localization, that finding the person, then comes retention. So if we separate both when you're looking at talent acquisition, it's very important to understand what motivates the person that you're trying to hire, because what motivates that person is what is going to allow you to define the retention strategy. For some people, it might be salary. For some people, it might be challenges. For some people, it might be flexibility in the time, like Darragh mentioned. And then when it comes to finding the right person, it comes back to the culture that was discussed just a second ago. So you need a person who's the right fit for the team. You're a startup, you're a scale-up, you need a doer. You don't need someone who comes in and looks at what's there and expects everything to be ready. Again, you need someone who can come in, look at what you have, and not complain, but actually come up with ways to improve what you have. So it's the incentive is on them to be able to add value with every decision. It's back to what we were talking about on the first question. So then in terms of retention, you cannot afford to lose someone after 6 months or after a year, because again, it's going to take another 2 or 3 months to find the right person. Once you have it on board, it's going to take you another 3 to 6 months to learn everything that the other person was doing, which, as Werner mentioned, that person has been wearing many hats. So you need to spread that knowledge from different places into one person. And there is one book that I've read a long time ago. It's called The Alliance by Reid Hoffman, which from the co-founder of LinkedIn. And it's amazing the impact that book has had in our retention strategy. Because in short, what the book describes is this is no longer our parents' or grandparents' age where you had one employee for life. Be the same company. Now, employees look for new challenges constantly, and whoever gives them that challenge, they jump on. So, because it's easy to just click a button on LinkedIn and you're looking for a new job. But what the book says is you need to align your goals as an employer with the goals of the employee. that goal for an employee could be, I want to work for Google in 3 years. And instead of turning that option down and saying, well, I'm going to maximize just little piece while I have them on board, and then they will go and go to Google. Instead of that, what the book says is actually define a strategy so that over the next 3 years, you define what are the things you need as an employee or as a person to grow into that position you want to achieve in Google. So then that's the motivation for the employee, is you're going to help them grow at a personal level to get to that job, to land that job in Google. And in return, that person is bringing in added value to your company in commitment, in learning new skill sets, and helping you grow around that knowledge. What happens is in 3 years, their goal may have moved. Now they don't want to work with Google anymore because they have, over the past 3 years, learned new things, and they realized the value of learning on the job. So, for example, at Swapsy, we have this, we call it own project. So we allocate 10% of their working hours to a project of their choosing. Some people may decide that they want to do a Microsoft certification, or they might want to get exposure to AI or to prompt engineering. As long as it's somewhat related to the value that can be added as part of Swapsy, that is approved. And we set the goals on how to actually get to that end line. And this marriage between the employee and, or I wouldn't say marriage, is actually a contract, a temporary contract that is renewed and reviewed every year on the performance review. That has completely changed and added huge benefit to our retention. And in fact, we have about 80% of our staff who have been with us with more than 4 years, and they all started as, or 80% of them started as interns. So all the way from internship to where they are now has been thanks to this strategy. So it's highly recommended.
I love that. Align goals of employer with the employee. Really, really good point there. So thank you for sharing that, Gonzalo. Has anyone got anything to add there? We've all had challenges. We all face challenges currently, maybe, or are all going through recruitment. Has anyone else got anything to add there to Gonzalo's point? Wojciech, Dara, or Werner?
I think the retention is key as well. You want to keep them, like as Gonzalo said, right? The main thing when you start is like when you're a startup, like you can start very low, like get the people on board, we often forget, right? We even in the bigger companies, even with my current one, we forget sometimes, we're looking for the talent, but then that talent have to grow somewhere, right? And now the question is where the talent should grow, because we always thinking as we need mid or senior level all the time, forgetting that some people out of the college, they can really outperform that senior person, right? And in many ways, right? But and the goal setting, as Gonzalo said, I agree with that as well, that he might think that he wants to be in Google. Probably he doesn't. He just don't realize it yet, right? It's like a story with Agile, right? Like what you need to do to be agile, right? Like when your customer comes in, I want to move from Dublin to Belfast in the Porsche. Well, probably you don't. You just need to get from point A to B, right? But whether it's a Porsche or push bike, it doesn't really matter at the short term, right? Eventually, you're gonna find yourself you have to fly to States, because your business grew. So it's similar to the people. They think they think on the current stage of their career they want this because Google is great or Facebook is great, but then they realize I actually know more and I have better opportunities. Like when early startup, that in the Google, right? Even if you think about it, those early startup people, they progress through career quite quickly, and eventually they have a very high chances to become, like, senior management level, even, like, if they have skills. Try to do the similar thing in the big tech. Well, that's next to impossible, like, or it's gonna take a huge amount of time, right? So there is opportunities.
Thank you, Wojtek. Okay, so slightly different tangent for this final question that I want to ask you all, and I think because we're all at different stages within the companies that you founded 10 years or the companies that you're working for those that are aspiring to start their own tech company, very close to what Julian has recently experienced and been, co-founder of with Scopy, what advice would you give to them and navigating the challenges and actually capitalizing on the opportunities? Maybe Julian, could you give a bit of sort of insight to maybe what you've learned from the experience so far?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. So in terms of navigating the challenges and finding those opportunities, I would say leaning into the local ecosystem is like the place that you're going to find the most amount of support. So last year we went through a couple of startup programs, the NDRC Pre-Accelerator and New Frontiers. We're currently doing Prep for Seed at the moment as well. And it's not just the programs themselves that are fantastic, but it's the people that you get introduced to that just expands your network. You just wouldn't have the opportunity to meet them otherwise. And that's really fantastic. And then, of course, the local enterprise offices have also been really supportive. Enterprise Ireland has been really supportive. So funny coming from an Australian who's currently in Melbourne, but my co-founder, she lives in Ireland with her husband who's Irish, and also our CTO who's in Ireland as well. So I'm just living vicariously through the Irish ecosystem. But yeah, really leaning into those networks is what I would advise people locally.
Thank you. Dara, would you give any advice at all? Like I said, you've had a very lucrative way into founding the Loco. So there's obviously a lot of challenges that you might have faced, very different to previous roles. You're on mute again. Sorry, Dara.
Sorry, absolutely. Yeah, no, missed the button there. No, for sure. I think Ireland presents a huge amount of opportunity. Like I said, there's so much talent here. Both from like an advisor perspective to a kind of employee perspective and even co-founder perspective. Yeah, I think like leaning into that as much as possible is fantastic. What Julian says as well, like there are some great programs here, some great like literal spaces for startups in Dublin, like the Dog Match down in IFSC and whatnot. I think they're all great stuff. One thing I think some startups struggle with, and I always encourage them to look beyond, is at the Irish border itself. They think that Ireland is a great test bed for starting a startup, and it often is, but it's also a great place to just do it remotely and kind of look to maybe more dense markets or more scalable markets kind of as your original test or as your first place to launch perhaps. And obviously this massively depends on what you're actually offering, but anything that involves people, generally you're better off starting in a more dense city. Because I think, starting with Dublin, it looks like a big city, but it's really not when you kind of compare it to something like London or even maybe Manchester or something, But like I said, there's so much opportunities and so many people that will help you navigate all doing that as well. So I think it's a great place to do that.
Thank you. Just wanted to get Werner's thoughts as well, if possible, Werner. Obviously, your background, big tech giant, if you will, but just big company in Sage, then founding Lative. What's your experience been like that you can maybe give a bit of advice to any aspiring entrepreneurs that may be listening to this?
Thanks, Oliver. I think it's interesting with Sage because Sage is always big on being entrepreneurs within a big company, and that is part of the culture. And I think it was a great stepping stone in a way to founding Lative. And I agree with what Julian said. I think one of the things we found right at the start was we had an idea. I think we were fortunate, had a bit of a network that we could go speak with on how we can position Native, and are we really solving a problem that people would prepare to be paid some money for? Because building technology is not easy, and highly complex, and then it requires quite a lot of investment. So I think using the networks and people to run ideas past certainly helps, because it is all about message. And if you're going to look for funding, you got to be crystal clear on what you're solving for. And that's where what Gillian mentioned with those accelerator programs, they're really well structured on the questions they ask for how you answer them. And we found that helped us get clearer on our messaging and what we were doing, and how we articulated the value proposition of Native. That certainly helped. And like Adara said, the Dogpatch Labs and the group down there, there's a lot of people out there with great advice that can help. So use it. You don't have to take all of it, and people at different stages, but it certainly helps. The other thing I'd also mention is prioritization. It's really hard to get distracted, and there's many routes that you can go down, and it just becomes like what a ruthless prioritization I found, because you can only focus on 3-4 things and do them properly, then try and do 10 things at once. There's only so much time, and it is a bit of a gamble sometimes, and a bet on where do you bet that we should be focused so that we're going to get the return that we need for our time invested in this. Same with development on the product. We can't, everyone wants everything. That's great, but there's only certain pieces we can develop. It's the same. Again, the principle is the same, be it a startup or multinational. So I think with a startup, again, be prepared to really be prioritize what you're going to focus on. Be crystal clear. Get the message in straight. And leverage those accelerator programs. You might not get funding from them, but go through the process, because the questions are great. It helps you articulate things, as I mentioned, and you get to meet people through that way as well. So,
thank you, Werner, and thank you to you all for contributing to today's podcast. Just something quite fun to end off this recording. If we can all have you off mute, I'd be very surprised if the latter is voted for, but just wanted to get your thoughts on whether you favour a startup scale-up or a big tech after this discussion. So we're going to go around to end it off. So, Werner, what do you favour?
I'm going to have to go with startup. 20 plus years in multinational corporates, so I've spent some time in startups now. So
I had a doubt then you might have picked a big tech.
There are days where I go, I miss my corporate job.
Gonzalo?
Oh, I just love startups. Can't get
all the way.
All the way. In fact, we've been in business for 15 years, and we still act like startups. So, and behave like startups every day.
Brilliant. Dara?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to say startup. I mean, I miss my free lunch every day. There's other perks, I think. No, it's great. It's fantastic. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Free lunches alone, I'm sure you can let them go for a while.
Yeah.
Gillian?
Yeah, another vote for startups here. I love the pressure cooker of problems to solve. It's an exciting place.
Fantastic. And last but not least, Wojciech?
Well, obviously startups or scale-ups, so they're not much of a difference, but I've been primarily nearly my entire career, and I had one as well in the past. So yeah, startup or scale-up all the way.
Fantastic. So if you are a job seeker and you are currently in the process with scale-up startups and big techs, there you go. There's your promoters there for startup or scale-up. So a massive thanks once again to all our guests today for joining me. I really appreciate you joining on and sharing your views. And also thank you to those that have listened, and hope you can join us again next time.